the morning of January 24th, 2006, under the hot sun of Orlando, Florida, the last thing Joyce and Drew Kesse expected was a call from their daughter's boss. 24-year-old Jennifer Kesse was a vibrant young woman on the path to success. She was on top of the world, finding the love of her life, and recently purchasing her own condo. There was little reason anyone from her professional life would be reaching out to them. With some concern, Jennifer's boss informed her parents that she had not arrived at work that morning. This was completely out of character for Jennifer, as she was always sure to be in touch with those close to her, even speaking with her father just after 6 p.m. the day prior on her way home from work. Calls to Jennifer's cell phone all went unanswered, so her parents made the drive 2 hours to her condo to discover it empty. The only indications that anyone had been there were the wet towel and clothes in the bathroom, indicating Jennifer had been home and showered before she disappeared, with the most likely scenario being in the morning before she left for work. With so little to go on, the initial investigation was slow to start, with police telling Jennifer's parents that she would return, despite their pleading that this was not normal behavior for their daughter. And so, 18 years later, the question still lingers. Where is Jennifer Kesse? Jennifer was a bright young woman with an appetite for success and the know-how to achieve it. She graduated with a degree in finance from the University of Central Florida in 2003 and was employed as a finance manager at Central Florida Investments timeshare company. On January 22nd, Jennifer had just returned from a vacation to St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands with her boyfriend, Rob Allen. Rob lived in Fort Lauderdale, almost 2 hours away, and the two had recently found their relationship blossoming, despite the long distance, with Jennifer's mother telling authorities and the press that, quote, she was in love, end quote. Rob Allen shared these feelings, and by all accounts, the two had enjoyed their holiday together with the hopes that there would be many like it in the future. Jennifer chose to stay the evening of the 22nd at Rob's and then promptly left the next morning for work. On her way home after work, she spoke with her father around 6 p.m., and after returning home, she spoke with Rob on the phone around 10 p.m. Neither party were aware that this would be the last time they would speak to Jennifer. Rob Allen recalls the phone call vividly, remembering that Jennifer seemed upset due to the long-distance aspect of their relationship, an understandable emotion after spending the last few days together and then returning home to her condo alone. When Jennifer's parents received the call from Jennifer's employer, they made several attempts to reach her, each one being unsuccessful. Rob Allen also grew concerned as he did not receive his usual morning phone call, but chalked it up to a meeting that morning that Jennifer had mentioned. At roughly 11 a.m. on January 24th, 2006, Jennifer's parents called the building manager to check on Jennifer's condo as they began driving in her direction. The building manager reported that there did not seem to be anything unusual, and her car was gone, indicating that she left on her way to work. As her family and friends arrived to the condo, they immediately alerted the police, but due to Jennifer being an adult, they did not jump right into action. It was up to Jennifer's loved ones to begin circulating flyers and word of her sudden disappearance. It was only after the news began to pick up on the disappearance that police sent investigators to her apartment to begin digging for clues. Police noted the untouched interior of the condo, despite the bathroom, showing signs that Jennifer was home, but only for a short while. They were also able to ascertain that her phone and purse were not in the apartment. All these signs indicated that Jennifer had showered in the morning and left for work as normal, and her abduction did not take place in the condo, but rather on her way to work or between her condo and the parked vehicle. Unfortunately, due to the reluctance of police taking the disappearance seriously, over 14 people had entered Jennifer's condo, thus contaminating the scene. After 2 long days of canvassing, posting billboards, and handing out flyers, police finally had something to go off of. A couple had reported seeing Jennifer's vehicle swerving out of her apartment complex at approximately 7:40 a.m. on the morning of the 24th. It would appear, based on the eyewitness description, that there was a struggle inside the vehicle to gain control of the car, meaning that there had to have been at least 2 people inside. Police then had another breakthrough 2 days later, when they were able to locate Jennifer's 2004 Chevy Malibu at the Huntington on the Green apartment complex, approximately 1.1 miles from Jennifer's condo. According to police, this isn't a place where Jennifer would find herself, or be familiar with, and was associated with a numerous amount of stolen vehicles in the past. Police began to canvass the complex and review the inside of the car, leaving no clues or leads to aid in the investigation. The contents of the car provided nothing, and no fingerprints were able to be lifted from the surfaces within the vehicle, meaning the individual who parked the vehicle must have been wearing gloves or had wiped the dash clean. However, when police began to comb through the security cameras, they stumbled upon their biggest lead yet. The security footage revealed that on the day Jennifer disappeared, January 24th at approximately 12 p.m., an unknown individual backed her car into a parking spot of the Huntington-on-the-Green apartment complex and waited about 30 seconds before exiting. The unsub then walks away from the vehicle and strolls right past the active security camera. Unfortunately for investigators, camera technology was limited in 2006, and the camera took series of photos of every 2 to 3 seconds rather than active footage. As the unsub traveled past the front gates of the complex, his face was obscured by the fence posts, and what would seem like a case of terrible coincidence. Effort was put into cleaning up the security footage and getting a profile of the individual. The unsub appeared to be a male in work clothes, something that a contractor or painter might wear. They placed the individual at around 5'3" or 5'5", with an abnormally larger shoe size for someone of that height based on the individual's gait and movements. Other than that, the man in the video has never been able to be properly identified, and police were left back where they started. In order to further aid the investigation, the usual routes were taken. Every person in Jennifer's life was interrogated, and were asked to provide alibis. Heavy suspicion fell on Rob Allen, as he was naturally the closest person to Jennifer, and had been the last to speak with her. Despite Rob Allen being over 200 miles away in Fort Lauderdale, police still wanted to review him as a suspect. When the vehicle belonging to Jennifer was discovered, they had Rob on scene to watch as they opened the trunk of the vehicle, to see his reaction, suspecting that perhaps Jennifer could be inside. Rob Allen recalls the event as troubling and unsettling, being forced to face something that had a potentially traumatizing outcome, despite him being so far from the scene just hours prior. Jennifer was obviously not within the vehicle, and Rob Allen fell off the suspect list quite quickly. After these rounds of interviews, police worried that the case would continue to go cold, and indeed it did. Jennifer's apartment complex had no security cameras, leaving police with no visual evidence of the hours in question. The condo building did have a security guard who was to keep names of visitors in a logbook, but the logs seemed to be unkempt, and not accurate when it came to the coming and goings of visitors to the complex. Some of the names that were never recorded in the book were the various construction crews that were renovating several units within the complex. In the days after Jennifer's disappearance, these crews became hard to interview, with most of the contractors disappearing or never showing back up. There has been indication that perhaps a lot of these laborers are undocumented, and with such a publicized case and heavy law enforcement presence, they opted to get out of Dodge. There were times where Jennifer spoke with her parents, mentioning the renovations that were happening in and around her unit and the people doing the work. Jennifer said she often felt observed or watched when she would walk past the crews when she was on her way in and out of the building. As an attractive young woman living on her own, with crews of random men passing by and standing around eyeballing you, one could imagine the creeping thought of being vulnerable. I'm sure many women listening have been in a similar situation when being gazed at from a distance by a group of men. This behavior can be an unsettling experience and could raise concerns for a young woman living alone. It wasn't until 2009 when the case was revisited that investigators identified a woman they had never interviewed, who worked at the complex when Jennifer had disappeared. Police brought the woman in for questioning and showed her the footage they had of the unknown male walking away from Jennifer's car. Without much hesitation, the woman said the man in the video looked familiar to her. Based on his size, hairstyle, and clothing, she identified this person as someone named Chino, but she could not be sure if it was really him. Chino was a name that was unfamiliar to detectives on the case, but learned that he had lived in another unit at the same complex as Jennifer and was a maintenance worker there. This Chino individual had even done work within Jennifer's condo just 1 week before her disappearance. Detectives were stunned after submitting Chino's name into their lead database that within 1 week of Jennifer's disappearance, an anonymous tip came through telling detectives to investigate him, but they had never done so. Chino was an easy man to find, however, as he was currently serving time in a Florida jail for a statutory rape charge that had happened 2 years after Jennifer's disappearance. This sex charge added fuel to the fire as him being a suspect, and detectives were eager to interview him. Chino cooperated with detectives and remembers doing the repairs in Jennifer's unit, stating that she was present and then had left to go to work. He agreed to a polygraph test as well, and had passed, leaving police with little choice but to move on. Once again, Jennifer's case had gone cold, and despite attempts by Jennifer's parents to mark the case as cold, the Orlando Police Department refused to do so. Jennifer's parents felt that marking the case cold would give them more resources, but instead, police kept the case active, despite little work being put into it. In 2016, 10 years since she disappeared, the state of Florida declared Jennifer deceased, causing untold pain to her loved ones who had fought for a decade to keep her case alive. However, in a dramatic turn of events, Joyce and Drew Kesse sued the Orlando Police Department, demanding that they release all records in the case to them. In 2018, the new police chief sympathized with the Kesses and gave his investigators 6 months to produce new leads. After those 6 months, no new developments were made, and they released over 16,000 pages of documents and 67 hours of video and audio evidence to the Kesses under the agreement that the Orlando Police Department would no longer lead the investigation into Jennifer's disappearance. Wasting no time, the Kesses created a team led by them and a private investigator to dig through the files and evidence to see if anything had been missed. Starting from scratch, they returned to the scene of the crime and began the painstaking process of interviewing prior residents who had never been questioned by police, uncovering some shocking revelations. Despite being in a gated community with active security, the owners of the complex allowed workers to stay in empty units. Just like Jennifer's comments about the groups of men staring at her or making comments, several other women had reported these same instances as well. They recalled being made uncomfortable or feeling vulnerable as they came and went from their units. One former resident stated that her unit seemed to be visited while she was not home, with her belongings being rummaged through and even finding footprints in her closet. On one particular evening, she had caught a peeping Tom who was masturbating on her patio. When she confronted him, he fled. Despite reporting these events, they were never followed up on, and no individuals were ever apprehended. To this day, there has been little to no development since finding Jennifer's vehicle and the corresponding video evidence. It was revealed in 2023 by the Kesses that the Florida Department of Law Enforcement would be conducting a cold case review, though any further information into that has not been relayed. So given everything that is presented here, what do we know about Jennifer's abduction, and who could be responsible? Based on the wet towels and clothing found in the unit, we can assume Jennifer woke up for work, showered, and then left the apartment. We know that Jennifer's car was seen leaving the condo complex at 7:40 a.m. Later that day, around noon, the car was caught being parked 1.1 miles away by an unknown subject. Most of the theories into Jennifer's disappearance are based on wild speculation, so it's important to take each one with a heavy grain of salt. One particular theory is that of Rob Allen being involved. This is easily tossed out. He was cleared by police within days of the disappearance, had no reason to wish Jennifer was out of his life, and at the time was over 200 miles away when she was presumed to have disappeared. The next theory is that Jennifer was watched and had her routine studied by an unknown subject. When she left for work that fateful morning, she was ambushed and abducted by a stranger. Perhaps this stranger was one of the many construction workers living in the various empty units and had become obsessed with Jennifer, and finally decided to do the unthinkable. Some believe this to be the most likely, with the main argument of her being abducted once leaving the unit, or someone waiting by her car and then forcing her into it before parking it later that day. Police have said there appeared to be some sort of struggle on the hood of the car, with what appeared to be scratches or imprints on it. Some have pointed in the direction of her ex, who is said to have been out the night before drinking within just a few miles of Jennifer's condo. Online sleuths have made comments that their relationship had soured, but there is little detail into why that may be. Jennifer and her ex had not been speaking, and though this location to Jennifer's condo that night is odd, the crime seems to be too well executed for someone under the influence. Her ex also had an alibi that police found substantial enough to discount him as a potential suspect. The final theory is an odd one, and one that seems to be mired in speculation. It's that of a coworker Jennifer had mentioned who was apparently obsessed with her. This coworker seemed to be interested in Jennifer, but she did not feel the same. This person would get mad when Jennifer talked about their relationship and felt slighted when she did not reciprocate their advances. The details on this again are slim, but could be a plausible scenario. However, besides random banter on online forums, these claims remain unfounded. Unfortunately for Jennifer and those close to her, there have been no answers to her sudden disappearance over 18 years. Despite incredible effort and support from her family and the community to keep the case alive and pursue avenues outside of the traditional realm of law enforcement, we are no closer to locating her. It has been a struggle for all parties involved to make sense of who, how, and why Jennifer never made it to work that morning, and where she has been for almost 2 decades. Some hold out hope, while others presume her to be dead. What is certain is that someone knows what happened to her, and someone knows who parked that car and left it all those years ago. And until that information is revealed, Polygraph investigates.